Let me take you back a few weeks before the handcuffs and the hissing and the screaming, when I still thought I could just grow my tomatoes in peace. You see, I live on 3 quiet acres just outside of town, property my family has owned since the Eisenhower administration. No nonsense, no drama, until the HOA elected Karen McMillan as board president. Now I didn't vote for Karen, heck. I didn't vote at all because I didn't think I had to. Who would have thought someone could turn an HOA Facebook group into a dictatorship with emojis? Karen swept into power on a platform of protecting neighborhood standards. That meant no garden gnomes, no American flags over 5 feet, and God forbid your trash can be visible from the road for more than 8 minutes after pickup. People went along with it. She was loud, she had binders, and she quoted the CCRs like scripture. Her little clique loved it. Finally, someone was taking charge. But then she came for my root cellar. Now, this isn't some musty hole in the ground with cobwebs and pickles. It's a family heirloom hand-built in 1952 by my grandfather, lined with river rock, stocked with home canned goods and cold-stored potatoes. We store food, not secrets. But to Karen, it was a potential health hazard, not in compliance with neighborhood standards. Excuse me. Apparently she had concerns. She told the board she was investigating reports that my cellar might attract vermin. She had no photos, no complaints on record, just a gut feeling and a clipboard. I told her politely that my property was outside the HOA easement and had been grandfathered in long before she ever alphabetized a single bylaw. She didn't like that answer. The next week, I came home from the store to find the lock on my cellar door busted and Karen's SUV parked in my driveway, engine still warm. I walked around back, and there she was halfway down my cellar steps, flashlight in hand, yelling into her phone about unlabeled jars and unlicensed food storage. That's when it happened. I calmly closed the cellar door, clicked the padlock, texted the sheriff, and went inside to make a sandwich. This is the true tale of how one woman tried to weaponize HOA bylaws to control her neighbors and how she finally messed with the wrong one. Over the next few parts, you'll see how Karen manipulated HOA voting procedures to stay in power, used vague language in the CCRs to justify surprise inspections, bullied elderly neighbors into giving up their gardens and sheds, filed fraudulent complaints to local code enforcement, and ultimately broke the law herself just to prove a point. But you'll also see how I fought back with documentation older than she is, with a little help from a retired judge who happens to live 2 houses down, and with every ounce of stubborn, small-town, never-back-down energy my grandma left in my bones, because in this town, we don't take kindly to trespassers, and we sure as hell don't let Karen rewrite history with a clipboard and a smile. You ever watch one of those courtroom shows where someone gets absolutely wrecked because they didn't read the fine print? Yeah, that's basically how Karen took over the HOA, except she didn't read the fine print either. She wrote it. Now, before she came along, our HOA was more of a formality. We had a treasurer who mostly collected dues for road repairs and someone who managed the mailbox keys. No one cared much what color your porch swing was, as long as your septic tank didn't back up onto someone else's lawn. But then Karen moved in. Fresh from Southern California, judging by the plates on her Lexus's SUV and loaded with Opinion's energy and a Wi-Fi-enabled measuring tape, she bought the Anderson property, the one with the wraparound porch and the Iron Rooster mailbox. And within 2 weeks of closing, she'd already introduced herself via a 6-paragraph email with footnotes. The subject line read, "A new vision for our community." We should have known at the next HOA meeting, which, mind you, was usually just 10 people eating pie and voting on potholes. Karen brought a printed packet, 34 pages, color-coded tabs, pie charts. She called it Phase 1. Phase 1 was about aesthetic consistency. She didn't like that half the mailboxes were wooden and the other half metal. She didn't like the American flag someone had hung over their garage because it was too large. She especially didn't like that I had a rooster statue in my front yard. "It's whimsical," she said, "but maybe a bit agricultural for our community's future direction." Honey, this is rural Kentucky. Everything is agricultural. Our farmers market has more visitors than the town library. But she wasn't joking. By the end of that meeting, Karen had suggested a voluntary compliance committee to review landscaping, proposed a $10 monthly increase in dues to fund community beautification, and handed out flyers encouraging everyone to join the new Neighborhood Wellness Task Force. Whatever that meant, still don't know. She also hinted that maybe it was time we rewrote the HOA charter. That's how it started. By the next quarterly meeting, she'd managed to get 3 of her friends elected to the board, mostly new transplants from out of state, push through several bylaw amendments under the guise of clarification, and institute a fine system for violations as small as visible trash bins or improper garden fencing. Suddenly everything needed approval: paint colors, porch decorations, even the height of bird feeders. And if you didn't comply, you got a letter, then a fine, then a second fine, then a threat to place a lien on your house, and people paid, not because they agreed, but because they didn't want to fight. Because Karen had turned the HOA into something closer to a petty tyrant's dream journal. But I didn't bite. See, unlike some of my neighbors who just moved in during the housing boom and didn't know their rights, my family had lived on this land for 4 generations. Our property was technically within the HOA boundary, but thanks to a clause from 1993, it was grandfathered in with special exemptions, meaning Karen's rules didn't apply to me. I kept my rooster, I kept my flags, and most importantly, I kept my root cellar. That last part really got under her skin. Now, to be fair, I didn't flaunt my exemption. I didn't go out of my way to start trouble. But when she sent me a notice asking for inspection, access to my property, citing some nonsense about food storage and neighborhood wellness, I kindly replied, "No, thank you. You do not have jurisdiction here. Have a blessed day." She didn't like that. Over the next few weeks, I noticed her little HOA task force parked just outside my driveway monitoring traffic, my mailbox being mysteriously left open. A few odd complaints filed with county code enforcement about soil runoff and odor nuisances. Of course, none of them held water, but that didn't stop Karen. At the next HOA meeting, she announced without warning that she was opening an investigation into unsanitary food storage practices and would be personally reviewing certain properties for the safety of our community. I raised my hand calmly. "Are you suggesting that you as an HOA board president have the legal right to search private property without a warrant?" She smiled like a kid who'd just drawn on the walls in Sharpie. "It's not about rights, it's about responsibility." That's when I knew she wasn't just drunk on power, she was absolutely hammered on it. The next day I installed a new lock on my root cellar. Not because I thought Karen would actually break in, even she couldn't be that bold, right? But just in case, I also pulled out a dusty old folder my dad left me. Inside original building permits from 1952, hand-signed exemption letters from the HOA's original founder, and a notarized letter from the county clerk confirming my legal protections under property grandfathering laws. And just for good measure, I called my neighbor, Mr. Connors, a retired circuit court judge with a soft spot for bourbon and front porch justice. He laughed when I told him what Karen was up to. "Oh, let her try. Judges love HOA overreach cases. I've seen bigger fines levied over garden gnomes." Still nothing prepared me for what happened next. It was a Wednesday morning. I'd gone to town for eggs and feed, came back around 10:30, ate a mint and noticed 2 things. 1, my cellar door was slightly ajar. 2, Karen's SUV was parked right outside my fence line, engine still running, driver's door open. I crept around the side of the house and peeked down into the root cellar. There she was, flashlight in one hand, her phone in the other, loudly narrating some kind of self-appointed inspection. And here we see several unlabeled containers, possible mold, clear evidence of non-commercial sanitation. I didn't say a word, just walked over to the door, closed it gently, and clicked the lock. Then I called the sheriff. He showed up 20 minutes later. Sheriff Blake knew my dad, played high school football with my cousin. When he saw Karen still in the cellar, banging on the door with a mason jar lid and yelling about illegal food preservation, he just looked at me and said, "You warned her." "Oh, multiple times. You got paperwork." I handed him the folder. He unlocked the door, helped her out, and told her to sit on the porch while he filed the report. Karen was furious, said I'd illegally detained her and violated her civil rights. Sheriff Blake smiled and said, "Ma'am, if I walked into your kitchen uninvited, I'd be arrested for trespassing. You crawled into this woman's cellar without permission, with a flashlight that's breaking and entering." Karen's face turned the color of expired beet juice. She was escorted off the property, and that was just the beginning of her downfall. Because what she didn't know not yet was that I'd been quietly collecting every HOA letter, fine notice and board meeting recording for the past 6 months, and I wasn't the only one. Turns out more neighbors were fed up than I thought, and we were just getting started. They say give someone a little power and you'll see who they really are. Well, Karen didn't just show us who she was. She She showed up, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, and tried to run the entire neighborhood like she was the sheriff judge. And HOA God rolled into one. After the Cellar incident, where she got herself locked in, interrogated by the sheriff, and thoroughly humiliated, any rational person would have backed off. Not Karen. She doubled down. A week after the sheriff escorted her off my property, she sent out an official-looking email titled Community Restoration Initiative, Phase 2, Enforcing Cleanliness and Order. Now keep in mind, this is a neighborhood where folks keep chickens, hang flags on their porches, and consider a decorative tractor tire yard art. Nobody asked for restoration. We were perfectly happy the way things were, but Karen wasn't. She announced surprise walkthrough inspections for every house inside HOA jurisdiction, including homes that had never received a single complaint in 30 years. She even listed specific violations that could result in daily fines: excessive wind chimes, non-standard flower beds, unapproved seasonal decorations, overgrown grass exceeding 275 inches, 2.75 inches. She literally brought a ruler to one house. And the worst part? She dragged other board members along, treating them like her little HOA army. One of them, poor Mr. Davis, looked like he was being held hostage the whole time, whispering apologies to homeowners behind her back. Carl is 72, a Vietnam vet, and one of the kindest men on the block. The man bakes pies for the 4th of July potluck every year and has an old oak tree out front where neighborhood kids tie tire swings. But Karen decided that Carl's flagpole was unauthorized, said it violated some vague clause about permanent structures in the CCRs. He'd had that flagpole up for over 20 years. He raised it every morning, folded the flag himself every night. His late wife bought it for him, and Karen wanted it gone. She sent Carl a formal violation letter with a $200 fine and a 10-day warning before enforcement action would be taken. You know what Carl did? He took that letter, folded it neatly, and duct taped it to the pole. Then he called me. You see, I'd been keeping my head down, collecting evidence quietly. But now it was personal, not just for me, but for everyone Karen had pushed around. So I made some calls, and what do you know? I wasn't the only one sitting on receipts. Janet from 2 doors down sent me scanned PDFs of every email Karen had ever sent, most of which were full of threats, arbitrary demands, and suspicious board-approved language that was never actually voted on. Mr. Connors, the retired judge, pulled out the HOA's original charter and pointed to multiple violations of protocol, including failure to notify residents of changes to the CCRs, illegally impose fines without proper hearings, conflict of interest on several board votes where Karen signed off twice using her maiden name. Then Sarah, the young mom down the street, showed me her recordings. Turns out Karen had visited Sarah's home under the pretense of checking fence height and ended up yelling at her 5-year-old for drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. Let that sink in. This woman threatened a child with HOA violation. Talk for sidewalk chalk. The following Sunday, I invited a few neighbors over for what I jokingly called a tea and paperwork party. We didn't serve tea. We served notice. Over pecan pie and lemonade, we drafted a formal petition to call a special HOA meeting under our governing documents. With 25% of homeowners' signatures, we could demand a board vote and potentially a full recall. By the end of the week, we had well over 50%. Even some of the folks who'd backed Karen in the beginning, like Nancy with the immaculate flower beds, had switched sides. Nancy said I thought she was just trying to help at first. But now she's treating us like tenants, not neighbors. When word got out about the recall petition, Karen flipped. She started canvassing door to door, handing out flyers claiming the board was under attack by extremists and that I was trying to destroy the integrity of the community. She even accused me of trying to turn the neighborhood into a prepper compound. Lady, I'm growing cucumbers, not building a bunker. Then came the anonymous letters, slipped under doors, warning of legal consequences for signing the petition. The sheriff got involved again and traced the paper trail back to Karen's home printer, strike 2. It was standing room only in the community hall. Karen stood up at the front wearing a blazer like she was on trial, which frankly, she kind of was. I brought the receipts, so did everyone else. One by one, neighbors stood up Carl with his duct-taped letter, Janet, reading one of Karen's nastier emails aloud, Sarah playing the audio of Karen threatening her child over chalk. Even Mr. Davis, one of her own board members, stood and admitted that many votes were made without quorum or proper process. The tension in the room was thicker than molasses in January. Finally, it came to a vote, and just like that, Karen was removed from the HOA board unanimously. She stormed out mid-meeting, mumbling something about slander and legal action, but no one followed her. except the sheriff who had just been handed a notarized complaint about Karen accessing private property without consent. Again, you ever clean out a closet and find something you wish you hadn't? Yeah. Imagine that, but with a community's entire HOA history shoved in it in a big old Karen-shaped bow on top. After Karen was booted from the HOA board and flounced out like a real housewife in a rage quit, we figured it was over. The rules were restored. The fines were reversed. Carl's flagpole stayed up. Life got quiet again. Until Nancy, remember her, the one with the perfect flower beds and unfortunate taste in siding, decided to help organize the HOA storage unit. She figured it was mostly old meeting minutes and unopened office supply boxes. But somewhere behind a stack of year-old water bottles and a suspicious number of laminated parking signs, she found the binder, not a binder, the binder that broke the HOA. It was labeled private, board eyes only. KM of course being Karen McMillan. Inside, let's just say she'd been busy. Nancy, bless her nosy little heart, called me as soon as she opened it. You need to come see this. Like now. 10 minutes later, I was standing over a table in Nancy's sunroom, flipping through what can only be described as a dictator's playbook. Spreadsheets of every homeowner with notations like fence looks old, target for replacement notice, printouts of Facebook profiles with little sticky notes like anti-HOA tone, drafts of letters never sent accusing certain homeowners of conduct unbecoming of the community. There was even a folder titled Contingency Plan Legal Escalation. Inside were pre-filled templates for cease and desist letters and a list of lawyers she had on retainer. This wasn't just HOA enthusiasm. This was full-on HOA surveillance. Karen had been tracking us like we were contestants on a reality show she produced. But the real kicker, tucked in the back pocket of the binder, was a USB drive. Now, I'm no tech wizard. My idea of cloud storage is a shoebox under the bed. But luckily, Janet's son works in IT and got that drive open in no time. What we found, recordings of private board meetings where votes were faked or manipulated. Emails between Karen and a county code enforcement officer pressuring him to look harder at specific homes. And I kid you not, a draft amendment to the CCRs that would have allowed her to install surveillance equipment for safety inspections. This woman was planning to put cameras in people's backyards. But here's the part that made my jaw drop. There was a folder marked Special Projects, RFP, and Inside Plans, bids blueprints, for what a community wellness center to be built right on the plot of land behind my house. You guessed it, my root cellar land. Turns out Karen had been working behind the scenes for months trying to invalidate my property's grandfathered exemption. Her plan was to argue that the land had been improperly zoned for food storage under newer regulations, and if she could prove it was a risk to community health, the HOA could file for eminent domain-style acquisition. Yeah, she was going to take my land, build a wellness center, probably with a yoga studio, juice bar, and HOA office featuring her face on the door, and she almost got away with it. She had a signed letter of intent to propose from a contractor, a drafted rezoning request unsigned but ready to go, and even a slick little PowerPoint presentation titled The Future of Heritage Circle Reimagined Slide 3 had a red arrow pointing right at my property with the words Possible Phase 3 Expansion, subject to override vote. You know what that means? She was planning on bulldozing my cellar and calling it a community upgrade. We brought everything to the next HOA meeting, the one we didn't even have to hold but chose to anyway so people could hear just how deep the rabbit hole went. Janet's son projected the files onto a big screen. We passed copies of the binder around like it was the neighborhood's juiciest gossip rag. The crowd dead silent. Until Carl stood up. That woman tried to take my flag, and she tried to take your land. What else was she going to take? Then Sarah added, my kid cried for 2 days after she yelled at him over chalk, and now she wanted to put up cameras. That was the match on dry grass. People weren't just mad, they were furious, and they wanted consequences. With all the evidence, the illegal surveillance drafts, abuse of authority, coordinated harassment, Mr. Connors, our retired judge neighbor, helped us put together a formal complaint, not just with the HOA, with the state HOA oversight board and county legal office. The accusations included misuse of HOA funds, violations of privacy, unauthorized planning without board vote, attempted manipulation of legal exemptions. The county responded fast. Turns out Karen had also filed personal reimbursement requests for expenses, like brunch meetings at a spa printer, ink refills from out of state. And get this, a $600 consultation fee to a marketing agency that just happened to be run by her sister. Yeah, not subtle. We didn't hear from Karen directly after that, but the letters started arriving. First from her lawyer, all bark. No bite. Then from her realtor. By the time summer rolled around, Karen's house was on the market. Listing said motivated seller, quiet neighborhood, strong community leadership. We made sure the new owners got a copy of the real HOA charter, the one without hidden surveillance plans or 3-inch grass height rules. As for the binder, we laminated it, put it in the HOA community room, right next to a sign that says, in case of emergency or extreme, Karen activity, break glass. Still there, still stocked, still standing, just like it has for 70 years. Carl stops by some mornings. We drink coffee on the porch. Sometimes he salutes the flag just because he can. You ever watch someone lose a fight? They started slowly, publicly, and with absolutely no grace. That was Karen. Except instead of a boxing ring, it happened in a fluorescent-lit county hearing room with a dozen angry neighbors. 2 lawyers, 1 retired judge, and a binder full of HOA sins. Let me walk you through it, this time from the County Ethics Committee. Apparently, our formal complaint, complete with USB files, printed spreadsheets, and Karen's Community Wellness Center PowerPoint had kicked off a full investigation. They requested Karen's financial records related to HOA spending, and she delayed, then refused, then sent over a folder full of incomplete forms, one of which still had her sister's Venmo handle written in pencil. Spoiler alert, that didn't go over well. The county froze HOA discretionary funds while the investigation played out. Karen tried to claim it was all a targeted attack by conspiracy theorists. That was bold. Considering we just uncovered that she used HOA money to buy Team Karen mugs, a ring light and microphone for HOA video updates, she said. And this is real, a massage chair for board wellness. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. Karen showed up with a lawyer who looked like he regretted every life choice that brought him to that moment. She wore a beige power suit, carried her own binder, and had that same tight-lipped smile like she was still running for class president. We weren't allowed to speak during the first part. Just sit and listen. She gave a long speech about how change is hard, how she only ever tried to serve the community, and how she was the victim of a smear campaign by certain individuals with deep-seated grudges. I don't think I've ever rolled my eyes that hard in public. Then came the rebuttal. Mr. Connors, our retired judge neighbor, stood up calm as you please and started his presentation. 35 years on the bench, and he still had the same I don't suffer fools delivery. He laid out the timeline, Karen's manipulation of HOA voting procedures, unauthorized surveillance plans, misuse of funds, harassment of residents. He had receipts. Literally, we passed them around like church bulletins, and then he played the audio recording. Remember the time Karen yelled at a 5-year-old over sidewalk chalk? Well, turns out she also made a phone call right after laughing about it with a board member and saying, maybe the HOA can fine him for poor handwriting. You could hear the air leave the room. After 2 hours of testimony and cross-examination, the County Ethics Board delivered its findings. Karen had abused her authority as HOA president, had violated multiple state statutes regarding private property rights, and had intentionally misled the HOA about financial matters. She was fined $15,000 payable, not to the HOA, but to a community restitution fund. Her voting privileges in any HOA in the state were permanently revoked, and she was barred from holding any board position for 5 years. But that wasn't even the real punishment. The real punishment was the silence in the hearing room. No one clapped, no one cheered. We just watched as the mask slid off her face, that tight, smug expression, melting into disbelief, then rage, then that twitchy kind of denial only seen in people who just lost power and don't know who they are without it. She stormed out muttering something about appeals and lawsuits and taking this to the governor. Last I checked, the governor didn't care about Karen's flag height crusade. Once the storm passed, the neighborhood came alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. The new HOA board made up of actual volunteers. Not control freaks did what Karen never could. They listened, they simplified the bylaws, tore up the ridiculous fine system, and made one rule crystal clear. We're neighbors, not overlords. Let's act like it. We planted a community garden right on the lot where Karen once wanted to build her juice bar wellness center. Every Saturday, folks show up with gloves and seeds. Even Carl brought tomatoes. Carl's flagpole, still up, still waving, and now lit with solar lights donated by Sarah's family. The HOA dues are lower. The rules are clearer, and people actually talk to each other again. It's funny how fast peace returns when the clipboard gets thrown in the trash. Well, she tried to sell her house, but word travels fast in small towns. Once her name hit the listings, buyers Googled her, and what did they find? Oh, just a viral Reddit thread, 2 local news articles, and a YouTube video someone made titled HOA Tyrant Gets Schooled by the Whole Neighborhood, with receipts. Let's just say interest dried up quick. Last we heard, she finally sold at a $60,000 loss and moved 2 counties over. Rumor has it she tried to join the HOA board there too. They politely declined. Sometimes I sit on my porch sipping sweet tea watching the sun go down over the garden, where my root cellar still hums with history. Carl waves from across the street. Kids ride bikes without Karens shouting about helmet violations. The rooster statue in my yard now has a little sign next to it. Unofficial HOA mascot. Long may he rule. We joke about putting a plaque in the garden that says, "In memory of community drama, 2023 to 2024, may it never rise again." But here's the truth. We didn't just get rid of a Karen. We took our neighborhood back together as neighbors, as people who remember that respect beats rules and good fences don't matter if you never learn how to wave across them. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Karen never thought she was the villain. To her, she was saving the neighborhood, keeping things tidy, safe and order. But here's the problem with people like Karen. They confuse control with community. They think enforcing rules is the same thing as earning respect. And somewhere along the line, they forget that good neighbors don't need clipboards. That power isn't about barking orders, it's about listening. That waving at someone matters more than measuring their grass. That a kid's sidewalk chalk is not a threat to public order. And that if you have to force people to follow you, maybe you're not a leader. But most importantly, she never understood that respect is a two-way street. And when you turn that street into a one-way HOA speed trap, don't be surprised when no one wants to drive down it with you. Don't ignore the small red flags, because those little suggestions and recommendations, yeah, they grow teeth. Never assume someone else will push back. Turns out everyone was waiting for someone else to speak up. Keep documentation. You never know when you'll need to bring out the binder. And most importantly, don't mess with Carl's flagpole. Now I've told you our story, but I know we're not alone. Have you ever dealt with a Karen in your neighborhood? Was it HOA drama? Petty fines? Someone measuring your lawn with a ruler? Tell me in the comments, we want to hear your story. No detail is too small or too spicy. Drop your Karen moment below. Let's build a little support group right here in the comment section. I'll be reading every single one, and I might even feature a few in a future video. And hey, if you enjoyed this story, the drama, the receipts, the sweet, sweet justice, give it a like. Subscribe for more real-life HOA madness. And don't forget to share this video with someone who's one clipboard away from snapping. Because if this saga taught us anything, it's that sometimes the best revenge is just standing your ground, calmly, legally, and with really good documentation. Thanks for watching, and remember, community isn't about control, it's about connection. And no, Karen can take that away from you.